Passion, purpose, possibilities. They're all right there. But sometimes we need a little push. And that's where SheSez comes in. Think of it as a master class taught by the world's most interesting women, sharing stories and ideas, because girlfriends help each other. This is SheSez with Linda Grasso. Hello and welcome to SheSez. My guest today is Candace Silvers. She's a human behavior specialist who travels the world guiding clients to achieve personal and professional success. Daughter of comedic actor Phil Silvers, Candace started out wanting to follow in her father's footsteps, but marriage and motherhood cut her acting career short. And some years later, Candace found herself as sole supporter of 4 children. Ultimately, Candace discovered her true calling, understanding the root causes of human behavior, and she now applies her insights to fields including business consulting, addiction recovery, parenting, and wellness. She's known in particular for pioneering a new way of quantifying human behavior, essentially guiding clients and companies to find where unconscious behavioral patterns are holding back growth, and she helps guide them to alter them, which is a real big challenge for, I'm sure, a lot of people. Candace Silvers, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure.
There are so many things I want to talk to you about. I don't know where to start. Do I start with your own personal reinvention? I think we'll do that. I met you by attending one of your women's groups, and I found it so fascinating what you're doing.
It was wonderful having you there. What a great asset you were to the room.
Oh, you're so sweet. I want to talk about your reinvention. You started out, you were the daughter of a very famous actor, and you wanted to be an actress. Did you have big dreams, or was it sort of more of a passing fancy?
I had big dreams. I actually couldn't see myself doing anything but acting. I made my first film when I was 15. My twin sister was Jenny Piccolo on Happy Days. So as a result of that...
I remember her.
Yeah. Is great character. And of course, my twin, an amazing human being. So I was on the show 5 or 8 times playing Carla B, her identical twin cousin. And but I made a lot of movies and worked, but not enough to support myself. And with the birth of my 3rd and 4th child, they're twins, I got a divorce. And it was...
How old were you at the time?
I was 33.
Wow.
I was 33.
And you had 4 kids at that time?
I did, from the ages of newborn to 7.
Wow. And mostly in your 20s, you were a stay-home mom, running the house?
No, I was acting.
So you were acting. Okay.
I mean, I was the head of the PTA. I did all of the, I was the librarian and all of the field trips. The parents used to call me and say, could you do less? Because our kids are asking why we're not there more. I mean, that was from the time I was 3 years old, all I wanted were children. I didn't play with dolls. I played with babies. I wanted children. I wanted children. And then when I got a divorce, it was time to support the family because I was married to someone who believed that I should be supporting the family. And so I supported the family.
Well, that's a huge thing for a 33-year-old woman to have 4 children and be sole supporter, and you were an actress.
They say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Yeah. I really believe that. I believe I'm one of the most powerful, intentional people I know because the only other option was to give up. Finding out that I could do what I did was...
you had to be afraid.
No choice. I was terrified on a daily basis. Yeah, I was terrified. How am I going to bathe the kids and feed them and go to the market and cook and go out and find a job and make money and do homework and be there for each one of them because I wasn't willing to do the best I could. I was only willing to be successful. When I got a divorce, I didn't pull the children out of private school. I didn't stop summer camps. I didn't stop tutoring. I actually at one point was about $300,000 in debt on credit cards. In the days you could surf credit cards. Thank goodness gracious. One of the most proud moments of my life was the day I paid off that last credit card.
Well, so let's talk about that. What did you do for a job?
Well, look, I had always had friends coming over for coffee to ask me questions about how would you do this or what do I do about that? And I loved my friends and I loved helping people. I just like helping people, and I'd chat with them and they'd come back and go, you wouldn't believe what happened to me. And
So you had an inkling fairly early on that you had an unusual talent for advising people.
No inkling and no thought and didn't know. I just loved my friends and loved people would ask me questions like they ask you, what face cream are you using? And you tell them and they come back and say, hey, I love that face cream. Thank you. You didn't think I could now own a face cream company. I didn't know. What happened when I got a divorce is my friends would come and I'd say, you guys, I can't talk to you anymore. I have to get a job. I have to feed my children. And at one point, a bunch of them came to me and said, I was also coaching them in acting. I was Roy London's client, a student of Roy London's for about 10 years. And he made, Gina Davis and Michelle Pfeiffer and Jeff Goldblum and Brad Pitt and Sharon Stone and Michelle Pfeiffer, on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would coach my friends as well. I didn't charge them.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point they came to me and said, will you start an acting class? And I said, no. They said over and over and over again, they'd take me to dinner and, guys, I'm not going to do this. Who would want what I have? And to get them to shut up, I actually said, fine, bring me 10 clients, material, and get me a space and I'll teach, knowing I'd never hear from them again because I was sick of being asked, because I was frightened. 3 days later, they came to me and said, we have 10 clients, we have a space, and we're ready for you to start whenever you want. I'll never forget driving to that class in Hollywood. I thought I was going to die. I couldn't even imagine walking in. And worse than that, the class I taught during it, people got up and walked out.
No.
Oh, I was horrible. Took me 2 years before I did it again. And then I started teaching. And when I started teaching, for a long time after every class, I cried because I knew they'd never come back, because what did I have to offer? And then people would come and say, how are you getting clients? And I'd say, I don't know. People just come. They say, can I run your database? Can I make posters for you? And literally my students built my company. I never did anything except show up and teach.
So this was when you were teaching acting. And then at some point, you made a pivot.
No, I started teaching about life long before acting. Several years before my acting classes, people just came to my house. And they came in 5 or 10
But that was
people.
an informal sort of thing. I mean,
I started charging them when I got divorced. It was, you guys, I can't do this anymore. And so they said, look, we'll pay you. I'm like, I'm not taking money from you. They said, well, if you're going to stop. I said, look, I can teach you, but I have to go get a job. So if you pay me, then that becomes my job. So I can teach you, which I'm not going to do. And they started paying me. So I started teaching them.
now it's so interesting because you hadn't gone back to school and gotten a master's in psychology or any of that stuff.
No, but I had studied around the world, and with really profound teachers, Roy London being an amazing instigator in all of that, as well as my father. When I was little, I would watch him on TV and he'd be standing next to me, and on TV and he'd be standing next to me. And there was no difference between real and real, REEL and REAL. I didn't know it at the time, but I never saw not real. From the time I was little, I could never go to scary movies because it was too real. I didn't understand make-believe. Today, I've been able to do things that disprove REAL. People that I know have miracles beyond anything our culture says is humanly possible or physically possible, and the joy of that is why I teach.
So how did you come to sort of get a professional career as a behavior specialist?
Linda, my answer is, I have no idea. I did what I was asked to do, and almost every time I threw up or cried on the way there because I knew I couldn't.
Well, but
I did it,
and
I found out I could.
So you just kept kind of pounding. There was something.
No pounding.
Well,
no
pounding meaning coming back in the face of adversity.
I was doing my 7th year teaching in India, and while I was there, someone handed me a business card and said, if you ever go to Bali, look this guy up. He'd be a great guide. I said, great. And I handed it to one of my assistants. And a couple years later, I looked at an assistant and said, do we still have that card for that Bali thing? I didn't even know where Indonesia was. And somebody found the card, and I said, call that guy and see if he'll run a retreat for us. And I'm now in my 7th year in Bali because someone in India handed me a card. That is my life. If it's in front of me, I'm doing it, period.
So it's sort of been this serendipitous journey for you. You've just
From your perspective, I would say yes. If we look backwards at life, all of our lives are set in motion with perfect equations of causation to delineate opportunity. And our culture, our cult, what is a cult? But cult, you are all, culture, all. A cult, you are all, an agreement to agree upon the same agreements. And the agreement I believe our culture has agreed to agree upon is failure. And you know how I come to that. It's not a cool idea, but most people we know are failing. Whether they're failing at business, health, relationship, vacation, rest. You know, maybe they're succeeding at relationship, but they're failing at the others, or they're succeeding at rest.
Well, back up for a sec. Isn't failure part of life? I mean, shouldn't we expect certain failures? Or
I don't
do
know
you
that-
have a problem with the word failure?
Yes. You see me
Just
coming.
want to get to that.
I don't see failure as failure. I see failure as just taking a little longer. It's just saying, open up this window of opportunity that your tool chest doesn't have yet.
Would you be more amenable to the word learning experience? Is that
Obstacles.
something?
It's an obstacle course. How many people want to live yesterday again? They don't, because it's boring, because they already know what happens. But they don't want to live today because they don't know what will happen, as opposed to the excitement of getting to be alive.
Yeah. So I think one of the things I do want to key in on is that notion of failure. As you know, SheSez, we're talking to women who are midlife, who were one thing in their maybe 20s and 30s, and then in their 40s, they're faced with empty nest, or, you know what, they don't want to be a lawyer anymore, or, you know what, they don't want to be a
Because they
aerobic
don't
teacher,
see the next chapter is just as exciting as the chapter before.
Exactly.
And that as we
Which
grow,
is natural, right?
we become assets for the chapters coming up from behind us.
I completely agree. How do they deal? Give us some advice, because you counsel people to sort of change their behavior and have some
So I don't give
self-actualization.
advice, and I
you
don't.
don't give advice.
I don't give advice, and I don't see problem. I don't answer questions. I start conversations that cause a new window of opportunity.
Well, so let's talk about that.
Great.
Let's talk about fear of failure. That's something that a lot of women grapple with
When
when they're
people-
trying to pivot midlife. A fear of failure, a fear of judgment.
When people are afraid of failure, they're resisting, and anything you resist persists. Put your hand in the water and push forward. It pushes the water back at you. Anything you resist persists. So when you're afraid of failure, it means as you walk into the room to get beyond where you were, all you're really looking at is what could go wrong. When you show up in that same room doing that same thing, to be of service, to risk the loss of what you may think you are, to see what more you can be, you find out what's in the room. If you go in to manipulate the situation to get beyond your fear, all you're really being told is what's wrong.
It's so interesting, because I think a lot of the way women feel when they're at that point where they're stuck in percolation and they're looping is ageism and the pressure and
Okay,
the,
so I'm gonna stop
preconceived
you.
notions that society puts on them.
Well, there's our cultural again.
If they could put blinders on and just search inward.
Let's stop before you even go to that one, and let's do this one. If you and I, if there's going to be a 9-point earthquake today and we die today, we're old. Today's the last day of our life. We're old. I'm 56 years old. That's the end of my life. There's an earthquake. I died. Because it's a 9-point, not. If I'm going to live to be 100, then I'm actually not even to middle age yet. I'm still young.
I know.
So when people identify themselves as an age group or old or young, what they do is take themselves out of the game, because none of us know when the bus is coming.
I know.
If you know that you don't know, it renders you present. If you try to stay within the wave you think you're in, you're always trying to stay within the wave.
Yeah.
If we don't know, we don't know, we don't know, which renders you present to what is in the room instead of how do I get beyond what I've been told.
Candace, it's so
I'm
hard
in.
to stay in the present.
That's the fun of life.
It's one of my biggest challenges.
That's the fun of life. You can't stay in the present. It's like seeing a shadow. You see a shadow and you know you saw it because you saw it, and you turn to see the shadow. And in the moment you turn, the shadow's gone. The shadow is seen sans the mind. The shadow is seen with your 6-week-old self that hasn't intellectually grown enough to edge out everything you don't know, which is everything beside your personal human existence experience. If we can learn to see that shadow with our 6-week-old self, which is a trial and error and a practice. If we can learn there's the shadow, don't look, commune. We're actually presencing because we have now entered a dimension that is beyond the self. We've now actually are interacting with something. Our mind is too small. It's a piece of the whole, not the whole itself. So the shadow world is one you enter. And I don't mean this psychological shadow world. I mean when we actually see a shadow and we turn to go, what was that? And oh, it was nothing. No, it is something. It's you didn't see nothing. You saw something. But when your eyes went to do the looking, your eyes are directly related to your history, to your file cabinet that tell you what that is. Your file doesn't know what a shadow is, so it says nothing's there. When we learn to see the shadow without looking, to know, to be in the knowing, to know the shadow, not see the shadow, that's presence. And that, Linda, is a practice. And that practice, Linda, is a reason for being alive.
So I want to talk about unconscious behavioral patterns. That's something that you really have a talent for kind of honing in on. Can you list some of them for us that are things for women to be aware of and be conscious of? Because perhaps you're doing something that you need to go, click, I need to address that in my head.
Yeah.
For women who are in the process of reinventing.
Yes.
And I say that in a broad sense. I want to let you know that doesn't mean getting a new job. It can, but
No,
it's
it means
not
a new mindset.
a new path, a new mindset, a new passion. It means kind of reinvigorating. It can mean switching careers, but it doesn't have to. What are some of the unconscious behavioral patterns that we as women need to recognize?
We don't need to do anything. We're born, live, and die. We
No,
don't.
but I think we need to recognize
No, we
them.
get to. It's part of the fun of the game of life. Part of that unconscious behavioral pattern is we think we need to. It's a joy to get to be alive. Let's look at all the people that are already done with this life, that already came and went, that are already gone, that aren't here in this game anymore. They miss paying taxes and cleaning their kitchen. They're not here anymore. It's an unconscious behavioral pattern that we have to. As opposed to we get to. We are alive. I don't know about you. I'm 56. I don't know that I feel 22. I know that I have more future coming than I have past thus far. And old means when you look into your past and there's a lot, and you look into your future and there's not a lot left. Young means when you look into your past and there's not a lot, and you look into your future and there's a lot left. The fact that I get to is a youth pattern. I get to meet you and do your radio show. I leave in a few weeks for a retreat in Italy, and right after that I'm taking a group to Prague in Austria, where we know our parents couldn't go because it was the behind the curtain. I get to do this. I have to or I need to is a pattern that breaks us, because the moment we say I have to, we look at why we don't want to. I get to play with toys. I have to clean them up.
That's a really healthy mindset, I get to.
I think so.
Yeah, I like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's something I've never even thought about before.
Well, that's my job. My job is to take us, it's how many different Harvard newsletters and different experts and colleges and have done these sort of programs where you take 200 flies and you put them in a jar. And you put a lid on the jar and you put holes in the lid so they can breathe. And for 2 weeks, the flies try to fly out and try to fly out and try to fly out and hit their heads and try to fly out and try to fly out. And after 2 weeks, you take the lid off the jar. Those flies will never, ever, ever try to fly out again because they already know there's a ceiling. Now, my job is to go where our cult hasn't gone yet, our culture hasn't gone yet, and take one fly out of that jar. One fly. One woman over the age of 40 out of that jar, and all of her friends will follow. You know that. Everybody's looking. When will we get married? One person gets married and all their friends start getting married. One has a baby and all the friends start having a baby. One gets a divorce and all the friends start getting divorced. You start to see that aptitude as real. And before the first one, it wasn't. It was an idea of my future. One person that we're viscerally linked to as the bridge in takes us out of the jar. Here we go. My job, what I love, and I wouldn't call it a job because I don't go to work. I love what I get to do. is help people out of the jar.
What portion of your clientele is women?
I couldn't tell you.
Is it 50,
when I
50,
was
would you
younger,
say?
I had more men than women. I remember that. I have a lot of doctors and lawyers right now. I'll have a lawyer that comes and she tells her lawyer friends. I have a lot of C-level executives right now. I have one C-level executive at Procter and Gamble, and she'll tell her friends, and here they come from OPI, and So it really depends on the 6-month or the year period on the flavor. Remember, this is my 25th year, so there have been a lot of waves. I've had a lot of actors, and then I'll have a lot of sober people, and then I'll have a lot of, I think it would be safe to say I have a really fair amount from about 25 years old to 70.
Do you find that you often are counseling women who want to make a meaningful change in their life?
I think I'm only counseling people, and I don't counsel, so I'm only guiding people.
I saw that in your copy. Note to self: use guide, not counsel.
Well, I'm not right. I'm just an equation. I'm a parable or an analogy that creates a parable that allows you to be willing to risk taking on in a daily practice that allows you to see that you're more than you thought you were.
So do you guide women often to
Absolutely.
help try to guide them to a life that's more fulfilling?
Absolutely. I have doctors and lawyers and heads of companies and housewives and moms whose kids went off to college and people who lost their children due to drugs or car accidents. And I have human beings who actually want to live while they're alive.
Yeah, it's a newer mindset, really. I mean, I don't know about you, but my mother never really thought about that, but I sure do.
I don't know that I would call this new age. I more am apt
new
to
age,
call
but
it old age. This is more
modern. It feels modern to me.
No, it's not. Not in my opinion, because they're tried and true equations of causation that every space and time caused success, whether it was Leonardo da Vinci or it doesn't matter when it was, because it doesn't belong to the cult. They're equations of causation. If you practice success, you will have success. In order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, in order to practice success, you must be willing to risk the loss of what you think is true in the moment. Because the only way to go beyond the self is to go beyond the self. And the self is identified by what it knows.
Candace, why do you think it's so hard for women in particular? I notice a difference between women and men with regards to this, to be selfish with their time, to carve out time for themselves and do what they want to do. We're nurturers, we're mothers, we're wives,
Creators.
We're multitaskers. We're doing all this stuff, even in my own house. Wonderful husband, great kids, but I'm running the entire thing and doing all this stuff. And I know I'm just taking this on a personal level. Sometimes it's hard for me to carve out time and do something that's just for me.
But isn't that the fun part, is no matter how good we are at the teeter, we're learning the totter? The game isn't the E or the MC square. The game is the equals. We have E equals MC squared, and we have these brilliant equations that come out of it. But it's not what we see that's manifest, materialized times the speed of light times what we thought that we then see. And it's not the manifestation that comes out of the energy itself. It's knowing that both are REEL and standing in the middle, and while we're alive living. By that I mean the shadow. By that I mean learning to do what culturally presently is impossible for us as individuals, or as a culture of women, or a culture of married women, or a culture of Indiana girls, or whatever that is flying out of that jar, living, having an experience like Christopher Columbus.
So you strike me as someone who's, aside from that sort of tumultuous period when you were younger and all of a sudden you found yourself a sole supporter of 4 kids. I mean, that had to be a panic. I don't care how
It was a panic.
Evolved or,
I was not evolved. I'm not evolved now.
No, but you were still giving, you were sort of seen as a wise old sage in your, at 33, you were giving advice to people. You still had to be panicked.
The difference is it didn't send me home to bed with a glass of wine. It sent me out in the world to do the impossible, because I couldn't go home, look at my children, and say no diapers today.
Do you believe in fate? Do you believe that was supposed to happen to you?
Oh boy, here we go. How many hours do we have? So fate is an actualization of causation. Fate is not a thought do. Fate is something that happens to you, through you, because you took an action. You turn around and look back and it makes sense. On the way there, it's nonsense. On the way back, it's perfect sense. So, oh boy, this leads into a whole other
I get
basket
where you're
of jewels.
going, though. It's a man-made
Only
construct.
the small, insignificant mind that you're raised by the Ku Klux Klan, or you're raised by a Jewish family, or you're raised by hippies. we blame each other. But what you're raised by, we mistake our own field of vision for the field of vision of the world. And whatever your mothership is that you came through, that her field of vision told you what you were seeing. If every time she was angry, she ate, that made sense. If your mother deep fried everything that you ate, you grow up and you want things deep fried. But we blame each other. Now, there absolutely is a responsibility as you become an adult to grow yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But our culture, in my opinion, is missing those tools. And I think this decade or this 50-year period is going to be stop beaching ourselves as whales with wine and drugs and start risking, which is the fountain of youth. It's where the secretions of our actual neurology, our serotonins, our
100%.
imbalances come back in.
When I take risks, I feel more alive.
Absolutely.
And it's funny because I've always pushed myself towards fear. And I grapple with that. Like, why am I doing this to myself? Why did I do that?
Have you looked in the mirror lately? Have you? You're one of the most beautiful, enchanting. Oh, stop it.
You're
I forget.
so
Let's
sweet.
turn the radio off. You're one of the most beautiful, enchanting, kind, generous, giving, loving, passionate, committed, connected people I know.
Well,
That's why I'm sitting here today.
That's so incredibly kind. Thank
No,
you
it's
so
not
much.
kind, and it's not your birthright in terms of culture. It's your birthright in terms of nature. You actually got on with the maximum we have to date until we develop the next now. What was possible by heading toward fear, you actually are looking under the bed to disprove the lie of the mind that says there's a boogeyman there.
Mm-hmm.
And for that, you get to look like you.
Yeah, and I don't know about you. Oh, you're so sweet. Another compliment. They're coming from all angles. I feel so good about myself right now.
Well, I want to be in the room then.
But it's interesting because I don't think I think the tendency for a lot of women is to run from the fear.
Yeah, because it's a cultural norm.
Mm-hmm.
Run from the fear so it can't get any worse than it already is.
Mm-hmm.
It can't get any worse than it already is because the mind thought made it what it was. It can't get any worse. In America, we love this thing rock bottom. When it gets so bad that we cry uncle and we don't care what happens after that, that's when we begin to live. I like to catch you mid-air and take you beyond the glass ceiling.
Mm-hmm. You know, I think of my discussion with you from the moment I met you to, you know, your women's group to even now. You speak so frankly and so freely, and it's just coming from you.
Well, that's 25 years of practice.
No, but
I cried the first 2 years.
that makes you so much more human. I love hearing that. But like I think about women in general and our audience, which a lot of these women are looking for a new path, a new purpose, a new passion.
Don't look for a new path. Look for the chapter you're in. You're already in it. You talk about
Love
fate.
it. That's such a
Don't-
look for the chapter
Well,
you're in.
when you
I gotta
look-
write that down. So good. No, I'm taking notes. I'm a note
please.
taker.
When you look for something, you miss what's here.
So look, you're really evolved though. You know, that you can
Evolve from what? We're going to do that. If I'm 56 and I'm dying tomorrow, I'm old. If I'm 56 and I'm
No,
dying at 110, I'm young.
I'm saying you have a progressive mindset.
I'm not willing to agree to believe in the flies in the jar. I see people walking down the streets broken, and I know I can help them. So I'm giving them what I know. And I know there's someone behind me that can see me, that can help me. And I believe karmically. I just got off the plane from New York Sunday, and I had left a Prada bag on the plane with these two beautiful scarves we're putting on our family room wall. And I was almost where it says do not return. And I said to my husband, oh my gosh, we left the bag on the plane, and we walked back. And you can't get back on a plane. And with all of this,
Yeah.
rules and it was closed and everyone was gone, and it was 10 o'clock at night, and I saw this one man walking by. I didn't even know if he worked. Excuse me, do you work here? And he said, yes. And I said, I think I just came out of that door about 15 minutes ago. I left my bag on the plane. Long story short, he says, well, let me take you over there. And we go to the plane, and he's like, I'm not supposed to do this. He lets me on the plane. I'm not supposed to do this. I say, I was in 12B. I go to 12B, and they're screaming, does anybody see a Prada bag? And the lady goes, I got the Prada bag. And they hand it forward, and I, thank you, everybody. Have a great night. And off I go to still make baggage claim on time. I truly believe it's the energy I live in. Things happen for me. They don't happen to me. And most people, things happen to them. And I constantly go to sleep at night with such a sweet smile on my face that I have a daughter making straight A's in college and a son who's, opened restaurants and another son who's a great surfer and a daughter who's a jockey and you were just giving forward and giving back. I'm not looking to see where I should be or where I'm not. I'm doing what I can.
Yeah, I love that.
I don't do brain surgery. I help people with information.
I love that. I just find everything you say so fascinating. It makes me think and think and think. Candace, we end every episode of She Says with 3 takeaways, and those are simply things that women can think about after the episode's over. I kind of try to wrap it up with a few little nuggets. Help me do this. For you, I think it's this episode, I think it's, I loved it when you said anything you resist persists.
Absolutely. It's a mathematical equation of causation. It's not a good idea in this century.
I think that's awesome advice, even though you don't give advice. It's something awesome to think about. I loved it when you talked about fear and your thoughts on that.
Fear, we don't fear things we don't want. You don't fear being a plumber. You fear the things you want, which means if you fear it, head toward it. It means it's getting warmer.
And finally, I think the third one is look for the path you're on. Did I say that?
Look down at your feet.
Look down
See
at your
where your feet are walking? Watch them and head that way. Don't want what you don't have. Want what you have. Until you want what you have, you'll never have what you want.
I love that. Candace Silvers, I have enjoyed every moment of this. You are so enlightening to me. I find you super inspiring and just fresh and original and authentic. And those are really important things, I think, in life. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Go to SheSez.com. Leave us some comments. Download an episode, the entire season. And do leave us feedback. I really am interested in what you think. Thanks so much.